Adut Kir urged to extend outreach to detained Riek Machar. Juba, the appointment of Adut Salva Kiir as South Sudan's senior presidential envoy for special programs continues to spark debate over her role in national reconciliation, with fresh calls for her to extend her outreach to detained First Vice President and SPLMIO leader, Dr. Riek Machar. Adut, the daughter of President Salva Kiir, formally began her duties this week by meeting senior government officials and veteran liberators. Her engagements included courtesy visits to Vice Presidents Benjamin Bolmel, Taban Dengai, and Josephine Lagu, as well as retired statesman Joseph Lagu and Robbie Nujung, and Central Equatoria State Governor Emmanuel Adil. The series of visits, which were widely interpreted as recognition of service to the nation, drew both praise and skepticism. While some saw her gestures as a symbolic step toward unity, others questioned whether her mandate would be limited to consolidating her father's allies rather than addressing deeper national divisions. Dengbol Iruai, chairman of the South Sudan People's Liberation Movement/Army, SSPLM/A, was among those urging Adut to go further by engaging Machar, who has been under tight restrictions at his Juba residence since March. Adut Salva Kiir Mayardit has begun her engagements on a promising note by meeting her father's lieutenants, Iruai said. But the strongest signal of national healing would be for her to visit Dr. Riek Machar, who remains unjustly detained. Such a step would elevate her mandate beyond family loyalty and lay the groundwork for a culture of reconciliation. Machar's restrictions and fragile peace. Machar's confinement has remained a point of contention since the government limited his movement earlier this year, a move that opposition leaders and international mediators say undermines the 2018 peace agreement. Despite serving as first vice president, Machar's political activities have been curtailed, leaving his supporters increasingly frustrated. The SPLMIO has consistently accused Kiir's administration of seeking to weaken Machar's influence ahead of the long-delayed national elections, scheduled for 2025, but facing widespread doubts about feasibility. International actors, including the United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, the United States, and the Troika partners, have repeatedly urged Juba to lift restrictions on Machar and create space for meaningful political participation. Adut's appointment and political symbolism. Adut's rise to the high-profile envoy position, announced earlier this month, was widely seen as a sign of President Kiir's trust in his daughter to take on a unifying role. Supporters of the move say her youth and non-military background could allow her to bridge divides, particularly in outreach to communities disillusioned with decades of political conflict. However, critics argue that the appointment reflects entrenched nepotism and the personalization of power within the Kiir administration. For them, Adut's credibility depends not on symbolic gestures to ruling elites, but on whether she engages opposition leaders like Machar, who remain central to the country's fragile political balance. The stakes ahead. Observers say that with South Sudan's transitional period marred by delays in the constitution-making process, security reforms, and preparations for elections, reconciliation initiatives will be vital to prevent a relapse into violence. Adut has the opportunity to redefine her role as more than an extension of her father's influence. One Juba-based political analyst noted, if she reaches out to Machar, it would send a strong signal that her office is about healing, not consolidating Kiir's inner circle. As South Sudan approaches another uncertain election season, all eyes are on whether the young envoy will rise to the challenge of bridging the country's deepest divides or remain confined to ceremonial visits within her father's political base. Press release. For immediate circulation, South Sudanese politician urges UN Security Council to act amid escalating crisis. Juba, South Sudan, March 2025. Honorable Jul Namjek Daniel, a former member of the Transitional National Legislative Assembly, TNLA, representing Quebec County on the SPLMIO ticket, has issued an urgent appeal to the United Nations Security Council, UNSC, to intervene in South Sudan's escalating political and security crisis. In a strongly worded open letter addressed to the President of the UNSC and copied to the UN Secretary-General, African Union, IGAD, Troika countries, European Union, East African Community, RJMEC, and South Sudan's transitional government, Daniel warned that the country is on the verge of sliding back into full-scale civil war. A fragile peace at risk. Daniel said the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan, RARCSS, of 2018 remains the only framework capable of addressing the root causes of conflict. However, he warned the agreement is now on the brink of collapse following the House arrest of First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar on March 26, 2025, intensifying violence in Nasir, Old Fangak, and New Fangak, widespread human rights abuses and war crimes committed by SPLMIG, dominated forces in Upper Nile and Jonglei. He cautioned that the government has lost effective control over more than 85% of the country, creating insecurity, displacement, and food shortages. Accountability and governance failures. Daniel argued that South Sudan has failed in its responsibility to protect R2P, citing collapse of state institutions and inability to provide basic services, deepening economic crisis driven by corruption and illegal mining, militarization by officials already under international sanctions. He named sanctioned officials, including Bol Mel, Kwol Miniong Juk, Michael Makwe Luth, Taban Dengai, and Martin Elia Lamuro, as key figures undermining peace despite global restrictions. Key recommendations. In his letter, Daniel outlined 21 urgent steps for the international community, including enforcing the RARCSS in letter and spirit, removing sanctioned officials from government, prosecuting perpetrators of war crimes and crimes against humanity, maintaining the UN arms embargo, withdrawing Ugandan forces from South Sudanese soil, halting illegal mining operations funding the conflict, releasing Dr. Riek Machar and all political detainees, repealing the repressive National Security Service Act 2014/2024, establishing a credible election timetable under UN and AU supervision. Final appeal. Daniel concluded with a plea for urgent international action. The Security Council should not allow South Sudan to slide back to another war. The current crisis must be turned into an opportunity to link national peace with grassroots reconciliation. Stronger, sustained action is needed now to salvage the peace agreement and prevent further suffering of the South Sudanese people. Free Honorable Gatwatch Lampuch. A call for justice and constitutional order. Juba, the detention of Honorable Gatwatch Lampuch, member of the National Parliament, has raised grave concerns regarding the state of justice and rule of law in South Sudan. His arrest, linked to his opposition to recent military operations in Nasir County, undermines both the revitalized peace agreement and the constitutional role of parliamentarians. Honorable Gatwatch's appeal to halt military operations was an act of duty, not defiance. He acted within his constitutional mandate to ensure that his constituents are consulted and protected in times of crisis. The unilateral deployment of Agwalek forces yet to be formally integrated into the South Sudan People's Defense Forces, SSPDF, contradicts the provisions of the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan, RARCSS. If this deployment is the basis for Honorable Gatwatch's arrest, it signals a troubling political motivation rather than a legitimate legal process. The lack of evidence against him further erodes public trust in governance and undermines ongoing peace-building efforts. We call upon the government of South Sudan to 1. Immediately release Honorable Gatwatch Lampuch and drop all charges against him. 2. Uphold the constitutional immunity of members of parliament. 3. Respect the provisions of the RARCSS and ensure that all security deployments are lawful and transparent. We equally urge the international community, regional partners, and human rights institutions to engage proactively with the government to safeguard peace and democratic accountability. The detention of Honorable Gatwatch Lampuch represents not only an injustice against one leader, but a dangerous precedent for South Sudan's fragile democracy. Justice and peace demand his immediate release. Option 2. Advocacy Statement, Mobilizing Tone. Free Honorable Gatwatch Lampuch. Justice cannot be silenced. The arrest of Honorable Gatwatch Lampuch is a direct attack on democracy and justice in South Sudan. He is guilty of no crime. His only offense was to speak the truth on behalf of his people. Honorable Gatwatch opposed the unconstitutional deployment of Agwalek forces to Nasir County, forces that were never formally integrated into the SSBDF as required under the peace agreement. His voice was the voice of the people. His detention, therefore, is not only unlawful, it is political. When governments target leaders based on political opinion or tribal identity, they undermine peace, stability, and the very social fabric of the nation. If such arrests go unchallenged, no citizen is safe. We demand the immediate release of Honorable Gatwatch Lampuch, the restoration of his parliamentary immunity and rights, an end to the politics of intimidation that threatens to undo South Sudan's fragile peace. To the government, remember, justice delayed is justice denied. To the people, remain vigilant, for silence in the face of injustice is complicity. 3 newer men abducted by soldiers in Juba. Families of 3 men from Unity State are demanding their immediate release after they were seized by soldiers believed to be from the Presidential Guard Unit, known as the Tiger Division, in Juba on Tuesday evening. Eyewitnesses and relatives said the men, Gatdiat Peter, Masap Koang, and Gajang Dojer, all between 35 and 40 years old, were taken by soldiers in tiger-striped camouflage uniforms from a tea place in Haithura, near Juba University, at around 5 p.m. They were taking tea when they were picked up by armed men, explained Michael Thakingwini Jiao, a relative of the detainees. We got information this morning that they are being held at the Tiger Barracks in Giada. We went there, but up to now we have not got any details or assistance. They are civilians and not involved in politics, so we do not know why they were arrested. Another relative, Bichiak Gatu, said one of the detainees, Gatdiat, is a student in the Netherlands and holds Dutch citizenship. He had returned to Juba just 11 days earlier to get married. Efforts to reach SSBDF or Tiger Division officials for comment were unsuccessful. South Sudan's transitional constitution requires detainees to be brought before a judge within 24 hours of arrest, but in practice this protection is rarely observed. Option 2. Advocacy brief for NGOs, embassies, and rights groups. Arbitrary arrests in Juba. 3 civilians detained by Tiger Division soldiers. On August 26, 2025, 3 men from Unity State, Gatdiat Peter, Masap Koang, and Gajang Dojer, were abducted in Juba by soldiers believed to belong to the Presidential Guard Unit, Tiger Division. The men were taken from a tea place in Haithura and driven away in a military vehicle. Relatives say the detainees are civilians with no political affiliations. One of them, Gatdiat Peter, is a university student in the Netherlands and a Dutch citizen who returned to South Sudan only 11 days ago to marry. Family members were later informed that the men were being held at Giada Barracks, but attempts to secure their release or obtain official information have been unsuccessful. The arrests were not reported to civilian police, and no formal charges have been presented. South Sudan's Transitional Constitution, 2011, guarantees that detainees must be brought before a judge within 24 hours. This constitutional safeguard is being ignored, raising concerns of arbitrary detention, enforced disappearance, and targeting of ethnic Nuer civilians. We urge the government of South Sudan to immediately release the 3 detained civilians or present them before a competent court. In the practice of arbitrary arrests by military units, respect the rights of all citizens regardless of ethnicity or political affiliation. We call on the international community, human rights organizations, and the diplomatic corps in Juba to monitor this case closely and engage the government to ensure accountability. Renewed clashes raise fears for South Sudan's fragile peace. Juba, August 28, 2025. The latest clashes in Longchuk County, Upper Nile State, highlight the rising fragility of South Sudan's peace process. Fighting between the South Sudan People's Defense Forces, SSBDF, and SPLAIO troops loyal to First Vice President Riek Machar erupted Thursday morning in Mathiang, after what the opposition described as an SSBDF advance on their positions. This comes only days after similar confrontations in central Equatoria, including Lainya County on August 27th and Ye River County on August 16th, where at least 17 soldiers were killed. Opposition forces have increasingly drawn support from local armed youth, complicating the security landscape. Observers warn that such incidents underscore the failure to fully unify security forces under the 2018 revitalized peace agreement. Both parties continue to operate parallel armed groups, while delays in the integration of troops into a national unified force fuel mistrust. The absence of official SSBDF statements on these repeated confrontations raises concerns of escalating localized conflicts spreading into a broader confrontation. If not quickly addressed, the cycle of clashes threatens to unravel fragile political arrangements in Juba and could destabilize Upper Nile and Central Equatoria, two regions already scarred by past civil war. Option 2. Deeper political analysis, peace agreement focus. Longchuk clashes expose cracks in South Sudan's power-sharing deal. The fighting in Longchuk County between SSBDF forces and SPLAIO troops allied to Riek Machar is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader breakdown in South Sudan's transitional security arrangements. Despite the 2018 revitalized agreement on the resolution of conflict in South Sudan, RERCS, the slow pace of troop integration has left both government and opposition forces in control of significant parallel armies. The SSBDF continues to deploy loyalist units, including elements of the Tiger Division, while SPLAIO retains fighters in Upper Nile and Central Equatoria, often with backing from local armed youth. The renewed clashes come at a delicate moment. President Salva Kiir has recently consolidated power by sidelining rivals, even as his daughter Adut Salva Kiir assumed a key envoy role. Vice President Benjamin Bol-mel faces pressure amid speculation of shifting alliances. Machar's influence remains tied to the strength of his forces on the ground, making confrontations with SSBDF as much political as military. Analysts warn that the failure to resolve military integration is now the greatest threat to the peace deal. If SSBDF, SPLAIO hostilities continue unchecked, they risk collapsing the unity government and pushing South Sudan back toward full-scale war. University of Pennsylvania, African Studies Center. South Sudan, a history of political domination, a case of self-determination. Riek Machar. South Sudan, a history of political domination, a case of self-determination. By Dr. Riek Machar Tenny Durgan, Chairman and Commander-in-Chief, SSM/A. Since the historic Nasir Declaration of August 28, 1991, the demand of the people of South Sudan for the right of self-determination as a peaceful political resolution of the 40-year war in the Sudan has been a real challenging problem to Sudanese political forces and parties. The SSGM/A, formerly the SPLM/A United, had been engaged in many peace initiatives with this present regime of the National Islamic Front, NIF, to find a solution to the conflict. Among these initiatives are the Frankfurt Talks of January 25, 1992, the Nigerian-mediated Abuja Peace Talks of May/June 1992, the Nairobi, May-June 1993, talks, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Drought and Development, IGAD-mediated peace talks, January 6, 1994, through September 19, 1994. In these talks, the SSGM/A had demonstrated its commitment to the search for lasting and just peace in South Sudan, and above all, the SSGM/A had specifically underlined the right of self-determination for the people of South Sudan as the cornerstone for settlement that would meet their legitimate aspirations. The people of South Sudan have been denied this right by the different regimes that ruled the Sudan since its constitution as a state. However, it is now imperative that peace shall prevail only when the people of South Sudan are acceded their inalienable right to self-determination. On the other hand, although it is generally accepted that there is racial, religious, cultural, linguistic, and historical diversity in the Sudan, these diversities have not been used to help enrich and consolidate the unity of the new state, but rather were used by the ruling Arab elites in the north to oppress, subjugate, and exploit the people of South Sudan, resulting in conflicts and wars. Historical perspective. To clarify the objective of the struggle of the people of South Sudan, it is important to go quickly over the colonial history of the South Sudan. The territorial unit claiming the right of self-determination before the Turco-Egyptian invasion of 1821. the Sudan consisted of kingdoms and tribal communities, without modern forms of government as we have today. In other words, Sudan in its present boundaries did not exist. The Turco-Egyptian occupation of 1821 was promoted by the expansionist ambitions of the Ottoman Empire and its craving for wealth and markets. The main commodities of interest were slaves, gold, ivory, and timber. South Sudan and her people became the main source of these commodities. The Turco-Egyptian and the North Sudanese collaborated in their raids against the South Sudan for slaves, resulting in millions of South Sudanese people being taken into slavery in the Arab and New World. August 29, 2025, Piji/Malakal. Tensions are rising in Piji County, Jonglei State, amid reports of military mobilization by forces loyal to detained First Vice President Riek Machar, residents and officials said Friday. South Sudan has seen a dangerous escalation in political violence since the start of 2025, particularly in the Upper Nile region, where clashes have pitted Machar's SPLAO, the White Army militia, and government troops against each other. Piji County, located at the confluence of the Sobat and Nile rivers just south of Malakal, is emerging as a flashpoint. Matthew Madiakalem, a Jonglei State lawmaker representing Piji, warned that attacks appear imminent in the county and northern Upper Nile. He said the White Army, composed mainly of newer youth, is mobilizing under the spiritual leadership of Makuch Tut. Our situation in Piji County is not good. There is fear of an impending attack, Lem said. A spiritual leader called Makuch Tut is mobilizing in Ayad County to attack Malakal, the capital of Upper Nile State. SPLAIO and the White Army are already present in Mat and Conliet. Their reported aim is to pass through and reach Malakal, potentially engaging SSBDF forces along the way. Local residents have begun fleeing villages near militia camps in search of safety. Paul Purr, the paramount chief of Piji, confirmed the fears. Our situation was normal, but over the past 2 days, reports of White Army mobilization have created concern. Tension is further heightened by the SPLMIO naming a new commissioner for the area. The intentions of the opposition-appointed official remain unclear. The SPLMIO leadership was not immediately available for comment. Civil society groups are also sounding the alarm. Bol Deng Bol, executive director of Intrepid South Sudan, described the atmosphere as volatile. The detention of First Vice President Riek Machar has created serious uncertainties across the country. Jonglei is among the worst affected states. We are seeing military mobilization on the ground daily. He added that the crisis requires urgent political intervention. It's unclear when the situation will spiral out of control. This is a political problem that requires a political solution. We call for de-escalation, dialogue, and the release of Machar and his allies. Despite the signing of the 2018 peace agreement, South Sudan remains deeply unstable, with renewed political and ethnic tensions threatening to plunge the country back into widespread conflict. Newly appointed Presidential Envoy for Special Programs, Adut, on Thursday held a high-level meeting with Jonglei State Governor, Dr. Riek Machar, focusing on peace, stability, and strengthening collaboration between national and state institutions. The meeting in Juba was part of Adut's ongoing consultations following her recent appointment by President Salva Kiir. She congratulated Governor Riek Machar on his leadership and received a comprehensive briefing on the political, security, and humanitarian situation in Jonglei State. Adut emphasized the importance of sustaining peace in one of South Sudan's most volatile regions. She reaffirmed the government's unwavering support for legitimate state authorities, noting that her office will work to enhance coordination on programs aimed at unity, reconciliation, and development. Governor Riek Machar described the talks as productive and forward-looking, pledging his administration's commitment to consolidating peace and addressing long-standing challenges facing Jonglei communities, from recurring intercommunal violence to widespread displacement caused by floods. He further welcomed Adut's planned visit to Bor, the state capital, saying it would provide an opportunity for direct engagement with local leaders and citizens. Adut's appointment to the Special Programs docket is widely seen as a strategic move to bolster cross-sectoral coordination on national priorities, particularly those with international dimensions such as peace-building, humanitarian response, and development partnerships. Observers say her engagement with Jonglei's leadership signals a renewed push from Juba to reinforce state-level efforts in stabilizing conflict-affected regions while advancing the broader national agenda of peace and unity. Juba, South Sudan's newly appointed presidential envoy for special programs, Adut, has drawn national attention after daring to visit detained First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar and posing for pictures with him, political sources said Friday. The unannounced visit comes amid heightened political tensions in the country, with Machar's loyalists accusing the government of sidelining him and suppressing opposition voices. By meeting Machar directly, Adut has projected herself as a bold political actor willing to cross divides that many in Juba's political establishment carefully avoid. Although details of their discussions remain undisclosed, photos of the two together have already sparked debate. Supporters say the envoy's move symbolizes reconciliation and a willingness to bridge political rifts. Critics, however, view it as a risky step that could upset hardliners in both camps. Analysts argue that if confirmed, Adut's outreach could signal a shift in how Juba seeks to manage the political crisis, particularly given her role in spearheading programs tied to peace-building, humanitarian response, and national unity. The presidential press unit has not yet issued an official statement regarding the visit. MP Machar vows, "I will never drop motion against VP Bol Mel." Juba, Member of Parliament Machar Mahjong has declared he will not bow to bribes or threats aimed at forcing him to abandon his motion summoning Vice President Dr. Benjamin Bol Mel to face questioning before the revitalized Transitional National Legislative Assembly, RTNLA. The lawmaker has filed a motion compelling Dr. Bol Mel, Vice President for the Economic Cluster, to respond to 13 charges, including alleged failures in governance, security lapses, financial mismanagement, and misuse of public resources. Speaking to Gatwatch Media, Machar confirmed authorship of the motion and said it has already been submitted to the Speaker's office for consideration. He stressed that once approved, he is prepared to push it forward without compromise. According to the MP, he has faced a barrage of phone calls since filing the motion, with some questioning his integrity and others suggesting he could be bribed to withdraw it. "Don't dream of me being bribed to turn down this motion," Machar said firmly. "Let them write whatever they want about me. Maybe they don't know me, but I know myself." While stopping short of making firm promises, Machar reassured citizens that he is determined to pursue the matter to its conclusion. "I cannot promise the people of South Sudan up to this time, but I am sure I am going to achieve my goal. So let us be patient and wait for Parliament to approve this motion," he added. If approved, the summons would mark one of the most high-profile parliamentary challenges yet against a sitting vice president in South Sudan's transitional government.